Welcome to Dice and Quills, where the art of storytelling meets the roll of the dice. I am Darren Ruckle, professional game master and TTRPG writer, here to share the craft behind world building, adventure design, and running unforgettable games. Whether you're a fellow creator, an aspiring pro, or a lifelong player, you're in the right place. So sharpen your quills, ready your dice, and let's dive into the worlds we imagine. Today we're stepping into one of the most loved and most feared parts of the job, improvisation. If you've ever had a player say, "I go talk to the dragon," and you had no idea the dragon was even awake yet, you've been there. If you've ever had your entire session derailed by a throwaway NPC you named Jeff on the spot, who is now the emotional center of the party, you've been there. And if you've ever walked away from a session thinking, "That was amazing, and I have no idea how I pulled it off," then yes, you've been there. Improvisation is part of every GM's toolkit. But using it well? That's craft. This episode is about learning to improvise with purpose, to say yes without losing your structure, to stay flexible without making everything feel random, to build the plane while flying it, without crashing into your own prep. We'll look at the different kinds of improvisation you face at the table, how to stay grounded in the story even when your players go completely off map, how to keep your tone intact while riffing, and how to make your yeses feel like they were always part of the plan. Let's start with the foundation, what improvisation actually is in the context of GMing, and why it's not the opposite of preparation. Improvisation in GMing isn't just making things up. It's structured responsiveness. It's the ability to take an unexpected input, a player decision, a failed roll, a wild theory, and fold it into the narrative in a way that feels intentional, even if you didn't see it coming. The myth is that improv is the opposite of prep, that if you're improvising, you're just winging it, and if you're prepared, you don't need to improvise. But the truth is, your prep enables good improv. The more you know about your world, your NPCs, your tone, your pacing, the easier it is to stay flexible inside that framework. Because improvisation isn't about pulling ideas out of nowhere. It's about connecting ideas quickly. It's about listening, recognizing what matters to your players in the moment, and then adjusting what you thought was going to happen so that the story still works. And there's the key. You're not just reacting, you're adapting. The best improv feels inevitable. The players make a sharp left turn, and you smile and say, "Of course that's where we're going." And you take the turn with them, without spinning out. So what does that look like in practice? Next, we're going to talk about the three types of improv moments most GMs face, and how each one asks for a slightly different skill set. Because not all improvisation is created equal, and not all of it serves the same purpose. Most improvisation moments fall into one of three categories: descriptive, narrative, and structural. Each one requires a different kind of flexibility and a different kind of awareness. First, descriptive improvisation. This is moment-to-moment stuff. The guard's name, the smell in the air, the way the tavern looks when they push open the door. You didn't plan it. You didn't need to. But now the spotlight's on you, and you need to say something. This kind of improv is low risk, but constant. It's where players test the world to see if it's real. And if you answer with color, confidence, and consistency, they lean in. The trick here isn't depth, it's tone. You don't need a 5-paragraph essay about the town square. You need to set a mood, give one or two concrete sensory details, and move on. Second, narrative improvisation. This is where the players do something you didn't plan for, and you have to decide what it means. They interrogate a minor NPC who suddenly becomes central. They ignore your hook and chase a different lead. They solve your puzzle backwards or use a spell in a way you hadn't anticipated. Here's where your prep gets tested. Not whether you memorized your notes, but whether you understand your world. If you know what the factions want, how the magic works, what kind of story you're telling, you can riff. You can move the goalposts without making it obvious. You can say yes to the unexpected without breaking your tone. Third, structural improvisation. This is the big one. The players take a turn that reshapes the campaign. They kill the villain too early. They ally with someone they were supposed to fight. They flee the city instead of solving the mystery. Suddenly, your whole session, maybe your whole arc, doesn't make sense anymore. This is where a lot of GMS panic, because the scaffolding starts to shake. But structural improv doesn't mean starting over. It means rethreading. You ask, what was this story really about? What themes, tensions, or stakes were I building toward? Then you reintroduce those threads from a new direction. You don't throw out the story. You reshape the path. Next, we'll dig into how to develop improvisation as a skill, not just a reaction, and why saying yes doesn't always mean saying yes exactly as asked. Improvisation isn't about being clever. It's about being available, mentally, emotionally, narratively. You're not just responding to the players. You're listening for what they're actually asking for, even when they don't say it directly. This is where yes and comes in. It's one of the most repeated pieces of GM advice, and for good reason. But it's also one of the most misunderstood. Yes and doesn't mean you agree to everything without limits. It means you accept the intent behind the idea and build on it. You're not greenlighting every action. You're collaborating in real time. Player, can I seduce the pirate captain and take over her ship? You might not want that outcome. But what's really behind that question? Probably a desire to gain power, shift dynamics, or engage with the pirate as a character. So your answer might be, yes, and she's deeply unimpressed. But she likes bold moves. She offers you a challenge instead. Win her respect in a duel. You've acknowledged the player's momentum. You've redirected it. And now you've got a scene with stakes. This is the core of improvisation. Finding the narrative yes inside the tactical no. It's also why tone matters so much. If your players are playing in a pulp action register and you're holding everything to grim realism, your improv is going to clash. You'll feel like you're dragging the game uphill. But if you meet the players in the tone they're actually inhabiting, you can steer their energy instead of resisting it. Improvisation isn't about being spontaneous for its own sake. It's about showing the players that the world is responsive and that their choices ripple outward. Next, we'll break down how to tether your improvisation to your prep, and why the best made-up moments often come from things you already knew but hadn't planned to use yet. The most powerful improvisation tool you have isn't your creativity, it's your prep. Not the rigid kind, not the 10-page timeline of events you hope will happen. I'm talking about relational prep, the kind that maps how your world behaves, not just what it contains. When you prep relationally, you're not writing scripts. You're identifying anchors. What does this faction want? What does this NPC fear? What rule holds this magical system together? What happens when that rule breaks? These are the threads you pull from when your players do something wild. A throwaway line about the Queen's hidden sister? Now that sister shows up when your players ask for a smuggler with royal connections. You didn't invent her just now. You already implied her. Your improv is built on a foundation you laid earlier, even if you didn't realize it at the time. This is what makes improvisation feel like good writing. Because it's not random, it's emergent. You're discovering the story at the same pace as the players, but you're discovering it from within the container you built. Keep a loose threads list during prep. NPCs who haven't been used yet, hooks that haven't been followed, secrets you seeded but didn't resolve. Then when the players knock on a door you didn't expect, you don't invent something from scratch. You check the list. You ask, what already fits here? It's not cheating, it's economy. You're using what you've already built to make the world feel deep. And when the players make a weird assumption, run with it if it makes sense. They say, I bet this is all tied to the Guildmaster's son, and you hadn't thought of that. But now you ask yourself, could it be? Does that tie into any of my existing pieces? If the answer is yes, congratulations. You just improvised something the players feel like they predicted. That's magic. Next, we'll talk about improvising NPCs. How to create memorable characters on the fly without breaking your tone or slowing down the session. Improvised NPCs are one of the fastest ways to build trust, or lose control, at the table. Your players will always talk to the wrong person. You built 3 layered characters with backstories and motivations, and they fixate on the stable hand you named halfway through a sentence. Suddenly that character matters, and you're on the spot. This is a gift, not a problem. Because improvising an NPC well is less about detail and more about definition. You don't need a backstory, you need an impression. Give them a voice, a posture, a single strong trait. Make them tired. Make them arrogant. Make them too curious. Don't overthink it, just anchor them. That's what players remember, not the exposition, the energy. Next, give them a want. Even a small one. They want a tip. They want someone to listen to their poetry. They want to be left alone. That simple desire grounds the character and gives the scene direction. Don't worry about how this NPC fits into the plot yet. Focus on the moment. If they stick, you can fold them in later. If they don't, no harm done. Keep a short list of improv-ready traits nearby. A handful of moods, accents, or quirks you can pull from without stalling. A grumbly dwarf with a raspy cough. A halfling who apologizes before every sentence. A warforged who always pauses before answering. These aren't performances. They're hooks, just enough to signal, this person is real. And when your players ask their name, pick something simple, 1 syllable. Nothing that sounds like 3 other NPCs in the area. If you freeze, repeat the last thing they said and use that as inspiration. Do you always ask strangers their names? Congratulations, their name is Strand. Works just fine. Don't forget to write the name down. If they come back later, that NPC has now become part of the fabric. And if you can connect them to something you already built, even better. Next, we'll look at how to improvise plot without losing momentum, and how to avoid the trap of spinning your wheels when the players go completely off the map. Improvising plot is where a lot of GMs start to sweat. The players have taken a hard turn, left the town, ignored your clues, sided with a character you thought they'd fight, and suddenly your entire next act is obsolete. This is the moment where panic tells you to stall. You throw in a random combat, or you invent a detour, or worse, you drop 5 NPCs into the scene to stall for time while you figure out what's happening. This is the trap, the wheel spin. The truth is, your job isn't to invent something completely new. It's to reframe the plot you already had in motion. The best improvisation doesn't create a new story. It reveals that the story was always more flexible than you thought. Here's how you do it. Ask yourself what the original story was really about, not the sequence of events. The core tension. Was it about a power struggle, a mystery, a character's arc? Then ask, how can that same tension re-emerge in this new direction? You plan for the players to confront a corrupt merchant. Instead, they leave town and decide to go talk to an old contact. That contact now knows the merchant. That tension follows them. The thread continues, just from a new angle. Keep your stakes portable. If the ritual was going to happen in the temple, it can happen in the forest. If the villain was going to send agents to the capital, they can send them to the player's camp instead. The location, the delivery, the pacing, all that can shift. What you hold on to is the momentum. Improvise forward, not sideways. If you find yourself stalling, running a scene that doesn't matter, waiting for inspiration, stop. Introduce a consequence, a clock, a new wrinkle, something that makes the players need to act. Because nothing kills improv like a scene where everyone's waiting for someone else to do something interesting. Next, we'll dig into how to stay tonally consistent while improvising, and how to avoid that jarring shift where your gritty noir game suddenly turns into a Saturday morning cartoon. Tone is the glue that holds improvisation together. Without it, your story feels like a series of disconnected scenes. Some serious, some slapstick, some cinematic, some chaotic. Players stop trusting the world because it feels like anything can happen for any reason. Improvisation without tonal consistency doesn't feel exciting. It feels unstable. But here's the good news. You don't need to lock the toned-down scene by scene. You just need to treat it like a compass. Every time you improvise, ask yourself, does this match the emotional temperature of the game we've been building? If you're running dark fantasy, even your funny moments need to carry shadow. If you're running heroic pulp, even your tragedies should have momentum. Tone isn't about genre. It's about emotional coherence. When you improvise a new NPC, describe a scene, or react to a player idea. Listen to the table's emotional energy. Match it. Reinforce it. Or, if you want to shift it, signal the shift clearly. Don't just slide from horror to comedy in one line of dialogue. Let the scene turn. This is where players sometimes push you off tone. Not maliciously, but because they're testing the boundaries. They try a joke in the middle of a tense scene. They suggest a plan that's clearly meta or absurd. You don't have to shut it down. You just respond in a way that reflects the world, not the joke. Player. I convinced the guard I'm a visiting noble by eating this entire ham in one sitting. If you're running comedy, go for it. If you're running grim political intrigue, have the guard raise an eyebrow and say, "Sir, nobles use knives." You're not saying no. You're protecting the frame. You're not the tone police. You're the tone anchor. Your job is to keep the emotional weight of the world consistent, even as the story flexes. Next, we'll explore what it means to read your table during improvisation, and how to recognize when a player is handing you gold versus when they're derailing the structure you've worked to build. Improvisation isn't just about what you say. It's about what you notice. Reading the table during improv is one of the most overlooked skills in GMing, and it makes all the difference between chaos and collaboration. When a player throws out a wild idea, it's tempting to judge it in a vacuum. Is this logical? Does this break the story? But the better question is, why did they say that? What are they reaching for? Are they trying to engage? Create levity? Get spotlight? Avoid a problem? Test the world? Understanding why they made the choice tells you how to respond. Sometimes a player hands you a gift. They improvise a detail about their backstory. They suggest something that makes the plot more personal. They do something unexpected, but it reveals character, not just cleverness. These are moments to run with. That's improv gold. You don't need to know where it leads. You just need to recognize that it matters, and that if you say yes now, you're investing in their sense of narrative ownership. That's what keeps players hooked. But not every improvisation is gold. Sometimes a player derails. They make a choice that breaks tone, ignores consequences, or rewrites something meaningful because they're bored or trying to reset the mood. You don't need to punish that, but you do need to respond. You can acknowledge the idea without derailing your structure. You can definitely try that, but here's what you know about the situation. Then frame the risk, the context, or the emotional cost. You're not shutting them down. You're grounding their improv in the world's reality. If they still want to go through with it, let the consequences land. The table will learn from what the world takes seriously. And if you're not sure whether an idea is gold or derailment, watch the other players. Are they leaning in, laughing in character, asking follow-ups? Or are they going quiet, checking out, waiting for the moment to pass? The table tells you what's working, not just with words, but with posture, silence, and energy. Next, we'll look at how to practice improvisation between sessions, and why improv isn't just something you survive, but something you can actually train for. Improvisation feels like a live fire skill, something you only get better at by being in the middle of it. But you can actually train your improv muscles between sessions, and doing so makes you faster, calmer, and more confident when the moment comes. One of the simplest exercises is the 3 things drill. Pick a noun, tavern, fountain, noble, and come up with 3 unique, vivid descriptors on the spot. Not a paragraph, just 3 things. It's got crooked stone walls, a rain-stained sign, and a smell like burnt clove. Done. That's all you need to build a scene that feels real. You can also run 1-minute NPCs. Set a timer. Create an NPC with a name, a single goal, and one physical or vocal trait. Don't write anything down, just imagine them. Do 3 in a row. That's your improv warm-up. Another exercise, reframe a scene. Take a classic D&D setup, a bandit ambush, a marketplace argument, a haunted ruin, and imagine how you'd run it in 3 different tones. What does it look like in high fantasy? In grimdark? In farce? This helps you stretch tonal flexibility so you're not caught flat-footed when a player's energy doesn't match your prep. For narrative practice, try what-if drills. What if the players side with the villain? What if they flee instead of fight? What if they burn the MacGuffin? You don't need detailed plans. Just explore what would still work. These drills sharpen your ability to pivot without panic. Most importantly, you can rehearse responses without scripts. The players do something unexpected. How do I pause, breathe, and redirect with confidence? That pause alone is a learned skill. And once you have it, you'll stop scrambling and start steering. Improv isn't about being witty or fast. It's about being grounded under pressure. And like any grounded skill, you get better by practicing the shape of it in calm moments. Next, we'll look at how to recover when improvisation doesn't land. When a scene flops, the logic breaks, or you say yes to something that derails everything. Not every improvisation lands. Sometimes you say yes and instantly regret it. The players zig, and your zag doesn't work. You improvise a twist that doesn't make sense, or a scene that drags, or a character that breaks the tone you've worked so hard to build. It happens. The key is not to panic. The second key is to own it, quietly, confidently, and without drawing attention to the stumble. Let's break down a few ways to recover when improv goes sideways. First, if the logic breaks, don't double down. Don't justify a twist that doesn't hold together just because you already said it. Instead, build in uncertainty. You think you see her in the alley, but maybe not. The light plays tricks here. That gives you space to revise or replace the moment later. Second, if a scene flops, move. Don't try to save dead air by piling on more dialogue or hoping the players will suddenly become interested. Cut the scene clean. After a few more awkward exchanges, the merchant shoos you out of the shop. Done. Don't explain it. Just pivot. Third, if you introduce something that derails the plot, look for ways to rethread the core tension. If a new NPC takes too much focus or the players skip a major event, ask yourself, what was that moment doing for the story? Can you deliver that same beat through another path? Fourth, if the tone slips, acknowledge it out of character if needed. Hey, I think I just made that scene funnier than I meant to. Thanks for rolling with it. Players will appreciate your honesty. You've signaled that you're steering the tone back. They'll follow your lead. And finally, don't be afraid to revise between sessions. Retcon gently. Thinking back, you're not sure that stranger was telling the truth. Or, you later learn the story was exaggerated. Not a lie, but not quite what it seemed. You're not erasing your improv. You're reshaping it. And that's allowed. Improvisation is elastic. You'll stretch too far sometimes. The recovery skill is part of the craft, not a failure of it. Next, we'll explore how improvisation builds player trust, and why the freedom to affect the story is one of the most powerful tools for deepening engagement at your table. When you improvise well, you don't just keep the game moving, you build trust. Because at its heart, improvisation is a message. It says, I'm listening. Your choices matter. The story isn't locked. It's alive. Players pick up on that. Whether consciously or not, they notice when their ideas are absorbed into the world. When the GM responds to them, not just through pre-written beats. That responsiveness deepens engagement faster than any world-building monologue ever could. Improvisation creates buy-in. It tells players, you have agency. You can reach into this world and change it. Your ideas aren't just tolerated, they're fuel. That doesn't mean you say yes to everything. It means you respond meaningfully to the things that matter. A weird theory becomes true, or at least close. A joke becomes a clue. A backstory detail becomes a turning point. The party decides a side character is worth saving, and suddenly that character becomes the soul of the arc. These moments stick, not because they were planned, because they were co-authored. You'll know you've hit this level of trust when your players start offering improv material. They'll say things like, "Do I know this person from before?" Or, "Maybe I've been here once, but I don't remember why." These aren't questions, they're invitations. They're handing you threads to weave back into the game. Say yes to those. Let the world reshape itself around the characters. Let the story grow from inside the table, not just from your notes. Because the more your players trust that you'll meet them in the moment, the bolder they become. The more curious, the more generous with their own improvisation. And suddenly you're not just running a session, you're collaborating on something that couldn't exist without all of you. Next, we'll talk about the limits of improvisation. When to pause, when to hold the line, and how to know when it's time to stop improvising and re-anchor the structure. Improvisation is powerful, but it's not endless. There's a moment in every game where you need to stop riffing and re-anchor the story. Knowing when to pause the improvisation is part of the craft. Sometimes improvisation starts drifting. The scene wanders. The tone slips. The players start chasing a joke or idea that no longer has stakes. It's still fun, but it's not moving the story forward. That's your cue. You don't need to kill the momentum. Just pivot it. Bring in a consequence, an interruption, a discovery. Something that reorients the moment toward tension, urgency, or choice. You're not ending the scene, you're realigning it. Other times, the players improvise something that would break the world. They want to invent a magic item, retcon a backstory detail that contradicts canon, or force a tone shift that unravels what's been built. These are soft no moments. You don't reject their idea, you redirect it. That's interesting. Maybe you've heard rumors of a blade like that. Or, let's hold that idea and see how this next scene plays out. It might give you a cleaner way in. You're pausing, not negating. You're reasserting structure without killing curiosity. Then there are the big ones. When improvisation has pushed you out of clarity. You've said yes too many times. The tension has flattened. The players aren't sure what they're aiming for. You've lost the spine of the arc. This is when you stop. Mid-session if needed. Take a 5-minute break. Step away. Rethread. Ask yourself, what's the next pressure point? What is this session still about? What has emotional weight? Then come back and reintroduce it. Through an NPC, a reveal, a shift in pace, something to remind the table that the story still has shape. Improvisation isn't about constant yes. It's about curated yes. You say yes to motion, yes to meaning, yes to character. And then you pause when that motion needs guidance again. Next, we'll wrap up with the final thoughts on improvisation as a long-term skill, and how it can become not just something you survive, but one of your favorite parts of the job. Let's bring it home. Improvisation isn't a fallback. It's not what you do when your prep fails. It is the prep in action. It's the practice of meeting the game as it unfolds, with trust, with flexibility, and with just enough structure to hold the shape of the story. It's a skill, a learnable, repeatable, trainable skill. It gets easier every time you do it. Every time you say yes and redirect with intention. Every time you anchor a wild idea back into your world. Every time you pivot without panicking, and every time your players light up because they know they were heard. And more than anything else, good improvisation reminds everyone at the table, including you, that this is a living story. That the unexpected is not a problem to be solved. It's a gift. It's a door. You just need to know how to walk through it. Next time on Dice and Quills, we're diving into narrative consequence. How to let player choices shape your world. How to deliver payoff without punishment. And how to use consequence as the spine of a living campaign. If this episode helped you think differently about improvisation, I'd love to hear it. Share the show. Send me your wildest improv moments, or leave a review wherever you listen. Until next time, sharpen your quills. Ready your dice. And remember, the plot is never lost. It's just waiting to be rewritten. Together.